So today I'm joined by Reeve of Windmill Bookkeeping and Training Services. Sue is an experienced bookkeeper and accountant and specialises in working with trade business owners to help them maximise their profits. Sue is also a trainer of software such as Sage 50, Sage Business Cloud, and also Xero. So it's really fair to say she knows a thing or two about finance. And I'm delighted to welcome Sue onto the podcast. We've been connected on LinkedIn, and I was really keen to get Sue on to talk all things finance to trade. So welcome, Sue, and thanks for joining me on the Happy Tradie podcast.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Pleasure. So do you want to start by giving us a bit of an introduction to you, to Windmill, bookkeeping and training, and kind of what got you into working in the sort of finance industry, and also, you know, your work with trades? What was the sort of spark, if you pardon the pun, to work with trades?
I like that. You practiced that, haven't you?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So I've been bookkeeping for 38 years. I think the catalyst for me to start my own business was COVID, like it was for a lot of people. And I was working from home, working for somebody else. The minute there was an opportunity to get me back in the office, they wanted me to be back in the office, even though there were various reasons why it wasn't a good idea for me and my family. And I just thought, no, that's it. I'm gonna jump. So I jumped, started my own business. So that was 3 years ago. It was I was actually part working for myself and part working for someone else, and then it was that made me go, right, that's it, I'm just going to go working for myself. So I actually started the business 2019 and went for it all guns blazing middle of 2020.
Right.
I've worked for a lot of trades. I've worked for joiners, builders, electricians in my working life. I've got a few friends that are traders as well. And so to start with, it was a little bit, you know, put yourself out there, take the work and start to build a business. But then I realised that I've got quite a lot to offer tradies because I understand them. I've got friends who are tradespeople, and I just decided that it would be a good idea to just niche right down to helping them. And then the more I get to know about the way they run their businesses, the better information I can give them to help them on the finance side as well.
Sure. So let's start. Can we dispel one of the stereotypes of trades? Maybe we can dispel it, maybe we can't, that they all come with a sort of brown envelope full of receipts, you know, over the past 6 months, and sort of dump them on your doorstep. Is that still a stereotype, or is that a myth these days? Are they getting smarter with more of the digital technology and smartphones?
I think there are plenty of people that are going down the right route. My partner's a Tyler, right, and he is still, I don't do his bookkeeping for obvious reasons. He still takes his receipts, albeit that they are packaged into months. He still takes his receipts to his accountant like that.
Yeah.
And he isn't changing.
Yeah.
And I know plenty of people that are like that. There's some really savvy tradies out there as well, don't get me wrong. And, you know, if we as bookkeepers and accountants introduce them to using receipt bank decks, all the different things that they can use, which hopefully we'll come on to in a little while, then they can get much more streamlined with the way they work, and avoid missing opportunities to claim back expenses that are valid claimable expenses simply because they've lost the receipt, you know. So I think there's a bit of both out there, to be perfectly honest. So we can't completely dispel the myth because they do still exist.
I thought we were going to do that on this podcast. Never mind.
By the end of it, we might be able to narrow it down to a lot less, because hopefully some of your listeners will think what a great idea it is to get a bit more organised.
Yeah, and I think that's partly the idea with this podcast, is to give them, you know, a little bit of help, a little bit of direction, signpost them in the right places where they can sort of get help. But I don't see as many, but I do still see the odd van with sort of receipts piling up on the dashboard. But I'm pleased to say it's becoming a little bit further and farther between. But you hit upon an interesting point there, which is by getting a bit more organized and sort of doing it as you go, you know, you can make sure that you're claiming for everything that you can legitimately claim for, right?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I provide people with a list of what they can claim. So and I always say, you know, if ever you're not sure, give me the receipt, and if we can, we will, and if we can't, I'll explain to you why we can't.
Yeah.
And you know, you build up a knowledge, and people then build up they build up that knowledge of knowing, I can claim for this, I can't claim for that.
So what are the challenges then? What are the barriers for trades? Is it just because they're so busy running from job to job, or is it just a historical thing that they've always done it that way, and you know it's much harder to get them to adopt sort of digital technology?
I think there's definitely a type whereby these guys who are now running their own businesses, and gals, I must say, who are running their own businesses, have maybe worked for people who work that way. And so, you know, you pick up bad habits, don't you? That's the way my boss did it, so why shouldn't it be the way I do it? I think there are a couple of other things, lack of time, because there isn't a tradie I know that isn't always rushing either from one job to another or from one job to a quote, because very often they're one-man bands, or they're one man with a couple of people that work for them part-time and things like that, and really everything's on their shoulders. So, and lack of understanding as well, in all honesty, you know, if somebody said to me, do your own tiling or fit your own shower, I'd go, on your bike. Yeah. I don't want to do my own tiling and fit my own shower. So why should we expect these people who are really good plumbers or tilers or bricklayers or whatever they might be, why should we expect them to be bookkeepers?
So
please don't put that pressure on yourself as a tradie either.
So how are we going to sort them out then? How are we going to get them more efficient? So the guys and girls that work with you, how do you get them set up so they avoid that sort of either last minute dash to get the receipts in, or you know, missing receipts? You know, what advice and you know, technology do you use, and do you encourage them to use?
Okay, well, typically, if I take on a new tradie, they might have a few months backlog. So maybe they got last April's self-assessment done, but we're now in, I don't know, maybe September or October. So there's a few months backlog. So I would just say to them, give me all that you've got. Let's get you up to date. In the meantime, as of tomorrow, we'll have you set up on an accounting software. With that accounting software might come the ability to capture receipts. So there's no more leaving your receipts on the dashboard to fade in the sun. Yeah. If it doesn't, we can find a receipt capture app that integrates with different softwares. So straight away, you've gone from gathering all your receipts to all of a sudden they're going through your phone. Take a photo of your receipt when you pick it up, and it's already winging its way into the bookkeeping system. So that's the biggest thing, you know. It's just that, get them up to date and then set them on the way.
And this technology is so smart. I mean, I use it in my business. I use HubDoc, which integrates with Xero, and it never ceases to amaze me, because my biggest you know, I don't leave receipts on my dashboard. I leave receipts in the inside bit of my wallet, so they sit there for about 3 or 4 days. Then by the time I've taken them out, they're all creased up, so the actual words are you know, quite difficult to read, but I'll take a picture of it and then send it up into the cloud. And it always amazes me that, like, moments later, it's been able to read that receipt, extract the name of the business, you know, the VAT number, the cost, the amount of VAT from a receipt that if I'm honest, I find barely legible. So there's some really smart stuff going on there. Really smart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as you start doing other things, like, for example, I then suggest that if they haven't already got a bank account that's solely for business, that's the next thing on the list. If you get an account that's solely for business, that's all you're having to reconcile. You're not having to say, was that Wix invoice for something that I did for a customer, or was it for some DIY, not DIY, because obviously they're tradesmen, but was it for some work I was doing at home, or, something somebody asked me to pick up? You take a recording of it there and then send it off, and you only pay for it with your business bank card. So already you've made your life easier.
Yeah, great
You're
point.
not having to extract everything else out of it. Kids' school dinner top ups and goodness knows what goes through people's personal bank accounts. So that makes it easier for them if they're doing their own, and easier for the bookkeeper if they're passing it on, because they're not getting lists and lists of queries. What's this for? What's that for?
And what I find is the new sort of entrance into the market, the new banks, Starling, Tide, and Monzo, and there's a few others. They're very clever with their apps. They allow you to create separate pots,
Like
spaces or pots. They're called different things, but that really helps if you need to move cash around and keep it separate, to your main account.
Definitely. And then along with some of those bank accounts, for example, NatWest, RBS, and Ulster Bank, and NatWest's free bank account, which is called Metal, METTLE, Metal. They all offer a free accounting software called Free Agent, which is really, really easy to use. It's got the app to collect your receipts. You can send estimates from there. You can convert estimates into invoices. It's fantastic and free.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. And if you went and bought it, it's $14.50 to start with, and then £29 plus VAT a month after that. So, it's a massive saving over the year.
Yeah, that's good, because it does add up. It does add up, especially when you start bolting on, payroll and VAT, and the software can go from being relatively cheap to very expensive when you pay a month, and really eats into your margins. And that's a kind of a nice segue actually into what I wanted to sort of talk about next, was the the headwinds that trades are facing with spiraling costs of materials, and the impact this is having on their business and ultimately their bottom line. And of course, if they're not tracking their finance on a monthly basis or even a weekly basis to track sort of their profitability, that can cause problems further down the tracks, can't it, for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important when either people start a business or when they suddenly go, do you know what, I could be doing more to understand my numbers and everything, is just to take a step back, maybe take a little bit of training or attend a workshop or whatever it might be, seek some advice from a bookkeeper or an accountant, understand how to read the information you feed in the software. Because it's all very well feeding it, but if you don't know how to read what's in there, you still can't. All right, you're being compliant, and that's great, and that in itself is a big step for a lot of people. But if you can also then be able to say, these were my sales, these were my costs, this is my profit at the end of every month, and that's been a good month or a bad month, you keep in a check. Are people, for example, realising just what an impact those spiralling costs are having, and are they passing those costs on to their customers? Because you can very soon go from a profitable to a non-profitable business just by everything costing more, and you as a tradesperson thinking, I can't really put my prices up. But if it's there in black and white, then you want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have to do it. I mean, it's the survival of your business. I mean, that question really comes from, I had a meeting with one of my trade clients over the weekend, and I think he was really shocked at the fact his revenue was going up considerably throughout the year, but his profitability was stagnant. because of this spiraling increase in costs that had kind of crept up on him. He hadn't really noticed it, I don't think, over the previous sort of 6 months, spiraling costs of importing goods from abroad, material costs, all of that sort of thing. So gradually those costs have been rising. He's been trying to sort of nudge the prices to his customers up, but kind of met some resistance because, of course, they've got this kind of, double whammy at the moment where material costs are going up, but also, homeowners are facing extreme pressure, to keep control of finances. So, while, we're not always saying people are always looking for the cheapest quote, they are comparing a lot more quotes and are more likely to try and push heavily on price. So it's really important to stay on top of those numbers.
Yeah. And what I'm finding with a couple of my guys as well is that even though if Joe Blogs wanted a job doing, they would always come to them, they're now finding that, they've just had a job done and they didn't have me do it because they have found somebody cheaper. And so it's well, that's where you guys come in, as it's marketing yourself so that you're still the one that people want to use. All you're doing is putting costs up to cover your own costs, really.
Yeah, and it's and that we've covered that off in a couple of previous podcasts, one to be released, where we sort of talking about the importance of having a really strong brand and how that can sort of reassure customers that right, they might be paying a few quid more, but they're getting quality tradespeople to do the job. So just kind of staying on the numbers theme. What in your experience are the most important numbers that trades businesses, or any business really, but trades businesses is what we're talking about, kind of need to have a handle on, on a sort of a monthly basis? What
I think certainly your cost of sales. So all the costs that go towards your final price that goes to your customer, because I hear people talking about, this item's gone up immensely and that item's gone up, but you think you can carry it. People think they can carry it, it's only a £5 a sheet, or it's only a £5 a roll, or whatever the product is. But that £5, they might, it might be multiplied by X. That's a lot of money. And if you're not looking at your sales, very basically, you need to be looking at your sales less your costs equals what you've got left. And don't forget that what you've got left, you've then got to take your tax out of, or your VAT if you're VAT registered and things like that. So it's really important to keep a very close eye on those, your sales less your costs.
Would you say they do that weekly or monthly or quarterly? What's your...
I'd say definitely monthly.
Yeah.
And if you've got time to look at it weekly, look at it weekly. If you are working with a bookkeeper or an accountant, use the information that they can provide you with. I provide my clients with monthly business progress planning so that they can see all their costs. They can see what it is against last month, what it is against last year. You can drill down into it as much as you want. But if you think, for example, that the next quarter is going to be a bit tight, maybe you should be looking at it weekly just to see how tight and if there's any tweaks you need to make, rather than wait until the end of a quarter and going, blimey, we should have done something about that sooner.
Yeah, I think certainly the guys that I'm sort of working with, I do sense they're wanting to learn more about the finance aspect of their business. I've been working with trades for over 15 years in my previous business, and then in when I had a sort of career in the corporate world, I was working with trades, and they're very good at what they do. They're very good at being skilled crafts, men and women. So they're very good at what they do, but they don't necessarily go into business knowing all the skills that you need to be able to run a business effectively. And I think one of those, as I've learned, to my cost over the years, is really getting on top of finance and understanding those numbers. I think it's so it's undervalued and underappreciated. And I know you would bear this out, but the having a good accountant and a good bookkeeper is probably the most important piece of advice I could offer anyone that's starting a business.
Yeah, it is. But also, I think another thing for people to maybe take into account is if you network at all, maybe seek some mentorship from people who have been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
They might not be in the same trade, but if they're tradespeople facing the same problems that you face, just say to them, do you mind if we have a bit of a chat? And where do you find you're losing most cost? Because not always do you realise, things like insurances, they almost go to the back of your mind because, well, I've got to pay insurance, haven't I? But it's still a cost.
Yeah.
And it's still coming out of your bank every month or every year.
Yeah.
And also looking at those regular costs and not just going, yeah, I'll sign up for another year. Actually looking at them and saying, is this giving me what I need? And is it the most competitively priced of that item? So insurance, for example, is this the best insurance I can get for what I need for the right cost? It's so easy to just tick it off and go, oh yeah, well, I'll go with them again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, of course, what's happening at the consumer end is consumers are doing just that. They're comparing a lot more than they were maybe 12, 18 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's really on you as the business owner to be doing the same of all of those sort of yearly costs.
Yeah.
Motor.
Remember, we talked about this at the beginning. They're out there doing the job, doing the quotes, doing etc. And it's just so easy to just go, yeah, I'll just go with them again. And it can have a massive effect on your business. So even if it's only 30 or 40 pounds a month over the course of the year, that's a lot of money that you can be saving.
They add up, don't they?
Yeah, it does, definitely.
30 or 40 pound in 5 or 6 different places, then all of a sudden it's a few £100.
Yes, exactly.
You can put into your marketing.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. There's definitely other places you could be spending it than giving it to the insurance company that you've been using for the last 7 years or whatever.
Absolutely. So do you see any sort of common kind of threads or themes of mistakes that traders make with their accounts? We've sort of looked at hoarding of receipts. That seems to be quite a common sort of challenge. The need to probe and look forensically at every sort of cost in the business. Any other sort of either mistakes or challenges traders have in your experience?
Yeah, and another one that I come across quite a lot is I say, did you invoice them for that?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'll do my invoicing in a couple of weeks. No, get your invoices out when you finish the job.
Yeah.
And then even if people are going to take a little while to pay, depending on your terms and things like that, at least if they've got the bill, at the end of the day, your customer expects you to turn up on time. So having turned up on time and done a good job, send them the invoice, get the money in your bank.
Well, this is a really interesting one because, again, I was chatting with one of the traders that I worked with last week. And I was saying, because he was saying about having some bad debts. And I said, well, surely you just charge them at the end of the job. You've got a tap and pay machine. Just charge them at the end of the job. As a homeowner myself, if somebody's come around and done some work on my house, if I'm honest, I would expect to pay there and then. And just because everybody else does, doesn't mean you have to as well. You're not, the best way I think I said this on like one of the first podcasts. You're not a bank. You're not a lending facility for homeowners. We've all got, credit cards, debit cards. And quite frankly, if you can't afford to pay there and then, you shouldn't be having the work done anyway.
No, absolutely. And the thing is as well that with things like free agent, as I mentioned earlier on, you can even with an electronic invoice, there's a pay now button. So they literally click the button and straight into the bank and paying. So there really is no excuse for bad debts in these days at all. But that's definitely one of the bigger ones. And also not planning for the tax.
Yeah.
So not putting money aside every month. You've got a fair idea, even if you base it on what you paid last year, you've got a fair idea of what you're going to owe next year. But the other thing is, which you and I have spoken about before, is the sooner that you can get your tax return done, the sooner you know how much you're going to owe to the taxman next January. So the year ends in April. Get everything off to your bookkeeper or accountant as soon as possible after that. If you're not doing ongoing, if you've got a bookkeeper, you're more than likely doing ongoing. But if you're with an accountant where you just visit them once a year, get everything into them, find out how much your tax is going to be, and then you've got 4, 5, maybe even 6 months to plan how much you need to save every month for the bill next year.
And this comes back to using those digital tools, because if you have a bank that allows you to kind of separate your pots of money, so you're not just dealing with one bank with all your money in it, you can on a monthly basis allocate a certain percentage of your revenue and profit for tax.
Yes.
And put it aside so you can forget about it.
Yeah.
We in another group that I'm a member of, we covered the book Profit First. I don't know if you've come across that.
I've not actually, no.
It's interesting. It's well worth a read, but it's the concept of keeping separate pots for your business, but allocating your profit is the first thing to come out of your bank. So you've got your profit set aside, then making sure that you allocate your tax, making sure that you allocate money for wages, so that you're not looking at one big number and thinking you've got all this money. If you were to take everything away, that number is going to be much, much smaller. So it's an interesting sort of framework, I guess, for
absolutely.
Any other tools that you use? If we're talking about sort of trades and tools, any other tools you use to sort of help, with tradies? I mean, we've got Receipt Bank, HubDoc, and obviously the accounting tools themselves. Are there any others that kind of make their day to day easier that you?
I think you touched on the fact that some people have something like a Square Point or something like that, whereby customers can pay them there and then. Again, that's a really useful tool, because it just takes away that somebody says I'll transfer it and then they've forgotten and all the rest of it. If you can do it there and then, or if you can send invoices out of an electronic software so that they can pay digitally, then obviously that's a lot better. But that's digital tools.
A lot of these tools, they integrate directly with the software package as well, don't they?
They do. They do.
Virtually, it will still mark it off as paid in the software.
And I mean, a time-saving tool, a lot of the softwares, if you create your estimate or quote in there, you can convert it to an invoice. So you're not retyping everything again, which cuts out, obviously, the opportunity to make errors, but also just means you can literally convert it while you're sitting having a cup of tea in your van in the afternoon, and you can send the invoice just before you leave at night, if you're at the end of a job. So again, it's taking away that not needing to catch up with things, just doing them on the go. The softwares all talk about you can do all of this on the go, and you can.
I don't think there's like you say, time is obviously an issue. I get that, because they're having to take on more jobs to sort of keep the revenue coming in and increase profitability. So all being sort of squeezed with time. But one of the best things really they can do is get help from a family member, even get one of your kids of a sort of appropriate age, to if they're earning a little bit of pocket money, get them doing a little bit of work for you, give them
get them scanning all your receipts and things like that.
And that can sort of save you time. So just on that sort of kind of thread of tips, and just before we wrap up, any other sort of tips on finance, bookkeeping for tradies that you wanted to share, or have we pretty much covered?
I think we've pretty much covered it, but maybe to summarize, get a separate bank set yourself up with digital software. On another time, we may talk about making tax digital. You're going to have a digital software in another couple of years anyway, because HMRC are going to insist on it. So do it now, get ahead.
Yeah.
Look at your numbers every month. Create your estimates so that you can convert them into invoices. And just, I think, ultimately, get a software and use it. Yeah. And if you need help, ask your accountant, ask your bookkeeper, or take a little bit of training. All of the softwares, particularly Free Agent, I know, have little training sessions that you can go on for how to, or they have videos to say how to create an estimate, how to convert it, etc. So it's out there. Everything is out there for you to use. Make use of the things that make life easier.
Yeah, that's great. Some really great nuggets you've shared there, Sue. And if anyone's listening to the podcast, tradies, and they're either in between bookkeepers and accountants, and or just starting off, where can they find you if they need help?
Okay, so my website is windmillbts.co.uk. They can email me, Sue at Windmill BTS, and they can call me.
Great. And what we do in the show notes, we always put a link to your LinkedIn profile as well. A lot of our tradies are on LinkedIn or active on LinkedIn as they should be. But just before we wrap up, a question I always ask guests on the podcast is, what's your definition of happiness? We've all got our own definition or our own kind of happy place. What makes you happy?
Yeah, well, my happy place is near the water, and I recently moved to Cumbria to live near the sea. So for me, this weekend, my brother came to visit, and we spent time by the sea, which is a happy place for both of us. So in a nutshell, do the things you enjoy with the people you enjoy doing them with, and just be content.
That's great. And the theme of all of these podcasts is hopefully to provide some wisdom, some insight, some nuggets, some tips on how to run your business more effectively, so you can enjoy those things and use the digital tools and use the software and use everything around you to give yourself some time to do the things that make you happy. Sue, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
On the Happy Tradie podcast. Some really great insights there, some really great expertise you've shared there. So much to unpack in the episode, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Thank you.